You've really gotten me intrigued with this whole empathy thing we're diving into.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff.
It's like a whole case for why it matters.
Right.
Not just for, feeling good, but for our brains, relationships, even morality.
It's huge. Right.
So, what's the mission here? To decode empathy's superpowers.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got Golan, we've got Brown for the emotional intelligence side of things.
Okay.
We've got Singer and Keezers going deep into the neuroscience.
Mm-hmm.
Even Gottman's work on relationships and childhood development research from Gilligan and DeCidi.
Okay.
We're going to really uncover why empathy matters, how it works, and maybe even how to cultivate more of it.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
Seeing a lot of big names here, but before we get totally swept away by the science,
Sure.
let's define empathy for a second.
Okay.
It's more than just feeling sorry for someone, right?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
And Goleman, our emotional intelligence guru, would definitely agree with you there. He would say it's about stepping into someone else's shoes and actually experiencing their emotions, not just intellectually understanding them.
Right.
So it's one thing to know someone is sad.
Mm-hmm.
It's another to actually feel that sadness with them.
Yeah.
And that's really the bridge to a deeper connection.
Okay, so empathy as a bridge to connection. I like that.
Yeah.
And Goleman links this directly to emotional intelligence, which makes sense.
Right.
If you can understand and navigate your own emotions,
Yeah.
you're better equipped to do the same with others.
Exactly. But what's fascinating is that empathy isn't just this emotional experience.
Okay.
It's actually deeply rooted in our biology. Tanya Singer's research
All right.
shows us that witnessing someone else's pain, whether it's emotional or physical,
Right.
actually activates similar brain regions as if we were experiencing that pain ourselves.
Oh, wait, so you're saying that if I see someone get a paper cut,
Yeah,
my brain is actually firing as if I just got cut?
that's the idea.
Ah,
And this is where Christian Keezers comes in and his work on mirror neurons.
your neuron. Okay.
Yeah, so imagine your brain is kind of like a copycat,
Okay.
mimicking the emotions and actions it sees in other people. These mirror neurons fire both when we do something ourselves
Okay.
and when we see someone else doing the same thing.
Okay, so if I see you reach for your coffee cup, my brain is mirroring that action.
Yeah.
Wow. But how does that translate to emotions like empathy?
Well, research suggests that these mirror neurons aren't just for physical actions.
Okay.
They also play a role in our emotional responses.
Okay.
So when you see someone smile, your mirror neurons fire as if you're smiling.
Huh.
And that creates that feeling of shared happiness.
Interesting. So our brains are wired for connection,
Yeah.
for mirroring those around us.
It's true.
No wonder smiles are contagious, right?
Right.
But I'm guessing it's not always that straightforward.
Right.
We're not always consciously thinking, oh, that person is smiling. Let me activate my mirror neurons.
You're right. It's a lot more
Yeah.
it's a lot more unconscious than that.
Right.
And a lot of empathy relies on what's not being said.
Okay.
You know, we're talking about reading between the lines,
Right.
picking up on those subtle nonverbal cues.
Body language.
Like facial expressions, body language.
Yeah.
Thankfully, you included Paul Ekman's work in here.
Yes.
He's like the Sherlock Holmes of facial expressions.
His facial action coding system.
Yes.
Or FACS.
FACS.
It's like a secret decoder ring for emotions.
I love that.
Breaking down all those tiny muscle movements in our faces that reveal so much.
It's true. And the important thing to remember is that these nonverbal cues are often unconscious,
Okay.
both in how we express them and how we perceive them in others.
Right.
So our brains are constantly kind of scanning for these subtle signs,
Wow.
trying to make sense of the emotional landscape around us.
It's like a silent conversation constantly unfolding. We're
Yeah.
sending and receiving emotional signals without even realizing it.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is but how does this tie into the bigger picture?
Yeah.
We've got empathy in our brains and our expressions, but what about its impact on our values and our actions?
That's a great question. And that's where Carol Gilligan's research, I think, becomes crucial.
Okay.
Especially her book In a Different Voice. She argues that empathy is the cornerstone of moral development
Okay.
and that it really shapes how we navigate relationships with care and responsibility.
So are you saying that empathy is what prevents us from becoming like uncaring robots?
In a way, yeah.
That it's the foundation for our sense of right and wrong, especially in how we treat other people?
Exactly. Think about empathy allows us to consider the needs and perspectives of other people.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences.
Right.
And that those consequences impact other people.
Yeah.
And without empathy, it's much harder to develop that moral compass
Right.
that guides us toward, compassionate and ethical choices.
Right. This is where things get really interesting because we're not just talking about fleeting feelings anymore. We're talking about empathy as a driving force behind our values and behaviors.
It is true.
It's like the invisible hand guiding us toward a more compassionate way of being in the world.
Yeah, and this brings us to relationships,
Okay.
which I know is something you're interested in.
Yes.
John Gottman's research
Okay.
offers some compelling insights into how empathy plays out in one of the most complex relationships we experience, marriage.
Okay. You're talking about the relationship expert,
Right.
the one who can like predict divorce with scary accuracy.
That's him.
So tell me, does empathy make an appearance in his research?
Absolutely. He found that empathy is one of the most significant predictors of marital success.
Interesting.
Couples who are skilled at tapping into each other's emotions,
Yeah.
really understanding where the other person is coming from, they tend to have more fulfilling and longer-lasting relationships.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you can genuinely put yourself in your partner's shoes, feel what they're feeling, it's got to be easier to work through conflicts, offer support, and just get each other on a much deeper level.
Exactly, and that deeper understanding is what he refers to as emotional attunement.
Emotional attunement. I have to admit, that sounds a bit like something you'd hear in a meditation retreat.
Maybe a little bit.
But break it down for me. What does that actually look like in a real-life relationship?
So with emotional attunement, it's about being able to not only recognize your partner's emotions,
Okay.
but also to respond to them in a way that strengthens the bond between you. It's not always about agreeing or fixing the problem, but about creating that safe space for those emotions to exist and be acknowledged.
I love that. So instead of stepping on each other's toes, emotionally speaking,
Right.
we're learning to move together with more grace and understanding.
Exactly.
But this isn't just something we figure out as adults, is it?
Not at all.
We've got childhood development in the mix here, too.
We do, and this is where Gene DeCiti's work is so fascinating.
Okay.
His research shows that empathy actually begins to develop very early in childhood
Wow.
and plays a crucial role in those early social bonds and moral growth.
It's like those heartwarming moments of toddlers sharing toys or comforting a friend who's upset.
Exactly.
Those aren't just about being adorable. That's empathy in action.
That's empathy in action, and it lays the foundation.
So those seemingly small acts of kindness are actually shaping their future relationships and moral compass.
Yes, and their ability to connect with others on a deeper level.
That's pretty amazing. But is this something we're born with, or is it nurtured through our experiences?
Well, DeCiti seems to think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
We seem to have a natural inclination towards empathy, but it's also a skill that can be learned and strengthened over time.
Okay, so it's not like you're either born with it or you're not.
Right, it's not a fixed trait.
So we can actively cultivate empathy in children, potentially creating this ripple effect that leads to more prosocial behavior and less aggression and bullying.
That's the idea, and it's really encouraging for parents and educators.
It's like we're giving them the tools to navigate the world with more kindness and understanding.
Yes, exactly, and to build stronger relationships.
This is all starting to paint such a powerful picture of empathy.
It's really quite a remarkable capacity we have.
We've got empathy in our brains, our expressions, shaping our values and relationships.
It's like this invisible force that connects us.
Yes, but I keep coming back to this idea of vulnerability.
Okay, yeah, that's a big one.
How does that fit into the equation?
Well, this is where Brené Brown's research is so valuable,
Okay.
especially her book, Daring Greatly.
Yeah.
She does an incredible job of unveiling the link between vulnerability and empathy,
Okay.
emphasizing that you can't really have one without the other.
I've got to admit, vulnerability isn't exactly the first word that comes to mind when I think of strength or success.
Right, it can feel a little bit risky.
Yeah, so how does Brown convince us otherwise?
She challenges that very notion.
Okay.
She says that vulnerability isn't a weakness, but a birthplace of connection, joy, and courage.
Interesting.
So by embracing our vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
we actually open ourselves up to experiencing the full spectrum of human emotions, including empathy.
Oh.
Think of it like this. When we allow ourselves to be seen, imperfections and all,
Right.
we give other people permission to do the same.
It's like we're lowering our defenses and inviting that authentic connection.
Exactly.
But how does that translate into actually being more empathetic?
Okay, so imagine you're trying to comfort a friend who's going through a breakup,
Okay.
but you're too busy pretending that you have the perfect relationship.
Right.
Your inability to be real, to connect with your own experiences of heartbreak,
Mm-hmm.
that creates a wall between you.
Wow.
But when we're willing to be vulnerable, to say, hey, I've been there, I know it hurts.
Yeah.
That's when we create space for empathy to flourish.
It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yes.
And that caring often requires us to be vulnerable to show our humanity.
Exactly. Vulnerability is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Okay, so if we want to strengthen our empathy muscle, we need to start by embracing our own vulnerability.
That's a great place to start.
That's a really powerful concept.
It is.
What other practical steps can we take to cultivate more empathy in our lives?
Yeah.
It's like we're trading those really rich, nuanced interactions for emojis and carefully crafted captions.
Right.
So are we at risk of losing our ability to really connect and empathize in a world that's increasingly dominated by screens?
That's the question, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
a valid concern.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's an easy answer.
Right.
But I think awareness is a good place to start.
Okay.
You know, we have to be mindful of how we're using technology and the potential downsides of spending too much time in the digital world.
Right, at the expense of real human connection.
Exactly.
So it's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
We can't just, unplug from the modern world.
Right.
But maybe we can be more intentional about how we connect when we are online.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about making conscious choices to cultivate empathy in all areas of our lives.
Okay.
Both online and offline.
So what if instead of just scrolling passively,
Yeah.
we use technology to actually connect with different perspectives, to have those meaningful conversations,
I love that.
even if they are happening through a screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about remembering that on the other side of those profiles and those comments,
Yeah.
there are real people.
With feelings and experiences.
Exactly. Each with their own story,
Yeah.
their own experiences, and their own capacity for empathy.
It's not a one-way street.
No, not at all.
We have to remember that.
Empathy is a choice.
Okay.
It's an active choice that we make every single day.
It's not passive.
It's not passive at all. It takes effort
Mm-hmm.
and vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
and a willingness to step outside of our own limited perspectives.
And that's a muscle we can keep strengthening, both online and offline.
Exactly.
Wow, this deep dive has been so eye-opening.
Fascinating stuff, isn't it?
We've gone from mirror neurons to the potential pitfalls of social media,
The whole gamut.
all in pursuit of understanding this incredible capacity we have for empathy.
It really is incredible, and it's something we can all continue to learn about and develop.
So where do we go from here?
Just keep asking those questions.
Yeah.
Keep seeking out new perspectives. And most importantly, keep practicing empathy in your own life.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's been a pleasure talking about this with you.
You've given our listeners so much to think about,
I hope so.
and I'm sure they're feeling as inspired as I am to step into the world with more empathy and understanding.
That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah,
Even small acts of kindness can make a big difference.
absolutely. Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.